So let's talk hands. So hands, there is not as much breakdowns of regions and stuff as there are with like legs, arms, body, head, and stuff. But this is probably one of the more difficult areas to sculpt because there's in this such a small area, there's a lot of things going on, and there's lots of different types of shapes going on. And if any of these shapes are wrong, it kind of throws off the whole thing. And just the fact that it's a very small area, like very thin fingers. Oh, fingers are very thin things to sculpt. The palm is a bit of a pig to get right. It can kind of be a bit tricky at first. But what I have been seeing in the class is after your third or fourth sculpt or whatever, it's actually your second or third sculpt. It's actually getting, you're starting to get hold of it. It's just about getting to grips with the fact that it's all about 90% move tool, 10% sculpting tool kind of stuff. But let's revisit some of those rules we need to know about. So number one of the big rules is the shapes of the hand. So I'll turn off that for now. Is the shapes of the hand, and there's two big ones. One of them is, and they're both the same shape. It's the Nike swoop. So if you remember, the Nike swoop is something like that. Okay, so we have these kind of swoop shapes in our knuckles and our palm a little bit. So ignoring the thumb, so ignore this thumb for now. What we've got is from the pointer finger knuckle to the little finger knuckle. So boom, 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 boom. As you can see there, we've got a little bit of that swoop shape going on. There you go. Swoop shape going on. So the highest knuckle is the middle finger. And then either side of that, the pointer finger, ring finger, they're a little bit lower, and then the little finger is even lower. And you can see you've got that Nike swoop, the upside down Nike swoop going on. Now it's not a equal parabola, it's not an equal curve like that, it's that kind of thing. If I'm overemphasizing it, it's this kind of curve. And you'll also see that in the palm of the hand. So it's really hard to get a picture of the hand looking down the fingers. So I've used this diagram here to show you that, if we take this center cross section here across the knuckles, then you're getting the same thing. You're getting that Nike swoop with the same fingers. So this would be the middle this would be the middle finger, pointer finger, ring finger, little finger. So we have these two curves, these two swoops that we really need to make sure that we get in there, because it stops us from just making our hands look very flat. Our hands are very shapely, curvy kind of objects, so we want to make sure that we're really kind of showing that off. Also, this diagram is really good at showing off that the fingers aren't in fact round, though we will be starting off with cylinders. What we want to do is get away from that cylindrical shape, that true cylindrical shape, and get stuff a little bit more squarer. So I want you to ignore these ones, the purple ones, because that's giving you the highlight of the shape of the fingernail and stuff. But these two are the top ones, these two are very important, because like I said, we're not round in our fingers, we're more like a bit of a weird bucket shape. Flatter at the top, rounder at the bottom. And that's mainly down to the fact that inside our fingers, our bones are at the top of the finger, and then the muscle and the muscle and the fat is below it. And also that our tendons run through the top of our finger as well. So they don't run through the center, they run through the top, like a little pulley system. So when I'm sculpting my fingers, yes, I'm going to start off with a cylinder, but then I'm going to end up with something that's just a little bit flatter and stuff. And around the palm of the hand as well, there is still a curve, but the main shapes are going to be on the inside of the curve, the inside of the palm, where you obviously got the what would be in this diagram, the fat of the thumb and the fat of the little finger there. Cool. So let's get rid of you. So pretty simple. Just remember those swoop shapes on the top and the bottom. Well, from the front and from the back. And also the gap in between the fingers. What we want to have a little flat surface at the in between of each one of the fingers, not a V shape. One, because that's how fingers actually are. It's the webbing in between the fingers give you that flatter shape. But also, if we bring all the fingers into a V in the middle, then we end up having webbing, like the Dynamesh webs together in the middle. It makes it very difficult to work with. It's a bit of a pain in the bum. So that's one of the most important shapes you got to think about, because that's also going across stylized characters. You can use this. Well, you have to use this across all different types of characters: young, old, fat, thin, muscly, lithe. The second thing is one that hopefully kind of blew people's minds in class. Is if you measure the tip of the finger, tip of the middle finger, down to its knuckle, and then you take that measurement and you put it on your back of the hand like that, you can see that there's appears to be a very big difference in size. Our fingers appear smaller or shorter on the palm of the hand rather than the back of the hand. That's because there's a webbing on the inside of the hand across there. Which means if we were to draw our hand without the fingers on, what we would have is coming down from the wrist, we have something that's like that. So here is where our knuckle is, and here's where the fat of the palm is, around here. Which, for me, reminds me a lot of where we're talking about the head, the neck, and then you got a C7 to clavicle kind of angle. We've got the same thing, so if you go from the knuckle to the end of the fat pad, you get, again, one of those diagonals. And that gives the impression of longer fingers from the knuckle side, shorter fingers from the palm side. So when I'm making my palm, I'm going to be making that shape very, very early on. There you go. And there's not many other rules we have to kind of think about. The curve, again, return to the curve. That curve does go into the fingers as well. So the knuckles. Again, kind of this shape. So again, whatever the knuckle kind of shape is here, you're doing the same kind of distance and curve in the knuckles as well if you were to line all those up. Another big one is going to be the shape of the bottom of the hand as well. So you've got the little pad at the bottom of the thumb, you got the pad at the bottom of the hand. So depending on the person, the natural makeup of the physiology, or if they're muscly, fat, whatever, you'll have different shapes across there. And then there's tendons as well. So as I was saying before, tendons run through the hand in pretty much a straight line. Like that. There you go. And there's one there as well. So tendons are also very important if you're doing very thin or very muscly people. If like me, I've got quite a lot of fat in the back of my hand, so I don't see my tendons that much unless I'm particularly dehydrated or I've eaten a lot of salt. So I'll also be thinking about the tendons. One of the last things as well, and we didn't go over this in class because I didn't want to put something in people's brains which might have stopped them thinking about kind of trying to do weird stuff in the sculpt, and rather just have you jump straight into trying to sculpt it. There is a measurement for the width of the wrist and the width of the fingers, minus the little finger. So there and there is pretty much the same as your wrist. Oh, what's going on here? So I'll try that again. So here and here is pretty much the same width as your wrist there. So your three fingers in the middle, minus your thumb and your little finger, is pretty much the width of your wrist. Which is then you're adding to the edge out there, and you're adding to the edge out there. So I didn't go over that in class because it's a bit of a confusing concept to get over through your head, while at the same time just trying to sculpt these surfaces at the same time. So if you imagine your palm, if you make your palm at first, it's the same width as your wrist. Take that down to your knuckles, and then you make the mass at the side of the palm for the little finger, and you make the mass at the side of the palm for the thumb. So we're going to use that kind of concept at the same time. Now the last thing as well is just talking about the actual regions. So you've got your palm obviously, and inside the palm you've got a few fat deposits. Obviously you've got your thumb fat deposit. So your thumb fat deposit, your knuckle fat deposit, and what I would call the little finger fat deposit, or the outside. So you could also call it the outside fat deposit. So on the palm of the hand, you got these 3 deposits, as well as some tendon information coming down. And on the back of the hand, what you've got is mainly, obviously, knuckles and tendons. That's the major information there. But of course, you've got your palm, your fingers, thumb, and then wrist. Now let's talk about measuring very, very quickly. The height of your big finger, or your middle finger, is the same as the height of your palm, give or take millimeters. I should actually be looking at that from the opposite side as well, from this side. So tip your finger down to your knuckle. It's the same as the bottom of your palm there. So essentially your middle finger and your palm are the same length. So remember that, because that stops you from having like incredibly long fingers. Or if you're not careful, it actually makes you have incredibly long fingers. Because if you make your palm too long or too short at the beginning, and then you measure your finger to that, then you're obviously going to either have really, really short hands or really, really long hands. So just make sure you get a good idea about the measurement. Now, obviously the hand is very much a half and half. Half of it is a palm, half of it is a finger. But for the length of for the hand in general, for the size of the hand, you're looking at the length of your face. From the bottom of the palm would be your chin. From top of your middle finger would be the very top of your face, not necessarily your skull, the face. So that also controls. That also tells you the shape, the length of the hand. So main things we want to talk about, remember, are just the regions of the hand: palm, fingers, thumb, and then these fat deposits as well as tendons. It's thinking about the width of your wrist is the width of the pointer finger, middle finger through to ring finger, and then you're adding the mass on for your little finger and your thumb. You need to think about that Nike swoop for both the knuckles from the front and the knuckles from, if we're looking down the hand. So remember that, so that we don't have very blocky flat hands. Blocky flat hands might be good for stylization, but not for realism. And then some of those measurements, so obviously thinking about how, the length of the finger from tip of finger to knuckle is the length of your palm. And the last one, and it's hard to show this because no one ever has any good pictures of it, is the direction of the hand. So I'm actually going to draw this myself. The direction of the thumb, sorry. So if I'm looking down the palm here, and this is my first knuckle, middle knuckle, ring finger, little finger, my thumb is not going to come out like this. You might see that in a lot of reference pictures, but that's when they're tensing the hands. And obviously, if you're showing like drawn diagrams, you've got to show all the pieces. You've got to show all the hands clearly, so they'll kind of put the thumb out a little bit further than it should be. We're going to be sculpting these in a relaxed position, and if you just shake your hand out and hold it up in front of yourself, so I'll turn on my camera for this so you can see what I am saying. So if you just shake your hand out and lay it out in front of you like that, so not like that, not like that, like that. Look at the direction in the thumb. So again, that nice curve in the hand, bush, but look at where the thumb comes out. So in my brain, I think that's coming out in like 45 degrees. If that's 90 degrees, that's 45. And it's not coming out at 90 degrees like that. It's coming out at 45 degrees. And it's like in 45 degrees and all these different angles. Basically, it's coming out of the hand backwards. And if we're standing with a character in T-pose like this, facing forward, the thumb should be facing towards the camera, and the back of the palm should be facing away. So that thumb should be pointing towards the camera. So that should be pointing obviously 45 degrees away from that direction. Again, if the hand's facing that direction, 45 degrees, that would. So hopefully that makes sense, and it will help you get an idea about how to bring in that thumb. Obviously in class I used the snake hook tool to bring out that thumb, and I'm going to do the same thing again for this. But I do want you to just remember that the thumb comes out like that. So if my hand's facing in that direction, my thumb's going to be facing in that direction. So if I do this from the top, so just draw a hand in like that. That's a bad hand. I don't know why I'm not using pressure sensitivity as well, it seems maniac. So there are my knuckles, there are my fingers and stuff. My thumb. Let's get the right length in there. There you go. My thumb's facing in that direction. If these are all my fingers. If these are all my fingers, there you go. So I thought my thumb coming out away from my hand like that. I do not want to see any right angled thumbs or thumbs that are too close to the hand. Again, we're sculpting our hands in a relaxed position. So we're going to use this from the arms and bodies video to sculpt our hands onto. So obviously this is at a bit more of an angle. In class I was sculpting mine not completely vertical, but I kind of put a bit more of an angle on it. Now this is, we're kind of coming in at that 45-degree angle, like I said. Before you start sculpting, you know, take a bit of time and think about how you want to approach this. You can either try and sculpt the palm straight out of the hand like I'm going to do. I'm going to use the move tool and snake hook and bring that stuff out. You could make the palm as a separate shape, and then the fingers are separate shapes, all that kind of jazz. So take some time to think about how you want to approach it. You can even technically use a Z-sphere to make this, but that you will have a ball for a hand that you've got to kind of push and mash into being a hand shape, and that might be a little bit tricky at first. But yeah, just take a bit of time at first just to know what you want to do. One thing I am going to talk about though, just before we start off, is polygroups. So get rid of lines there. So I've turned on this thing there. So this has been made up of several shapes. You can see there's some polygroup information in here. So my legs did have a polygroup information at one point, but I've got rid of that eventually. My arms are still from that Z-sphere, not Z-sphere, sorry, yeah, Z-sphere build. So every new Z-sphere has a new polygroup assigned to it. So that's why I get these colours. But that's not super useful for me. Because what if I just want to work on the arm or the hand or the leg or something? I'm going to need to, it's just going to be really difficult for me. So what I'm going to do is, before I make the hand, I'm going to set up some polygroups. So first of all, I want everything to be one polygroup. And how I do that is literally just nothing selected or anything like that. Just Control W will assign a new polygroup to everything. And I can keep pressing Control W until I find a color that I like. So that, boom, like that. There you go. Now it's easy to polygroup stuff because all I need to do is essentially mask off an area and then Control W. So for instance, if I just go mask, Control W, let's try and get some better. There you go. So there, now that region there is now a polygroup. And what that means is if I, for some reason, just want to work on this one area, I can hold Control and Shift and tap in that, and then it's going to isolate that bit off, and I can just basically work in that bit. And then tap in grey space to bring it back. So what that allows me to do is, you know, I can make my whole arm be a polygroup. I can make my whole leg be a polygroup. So I'm going to change my mask to a lasso, and I'm just going to try and cut out my arm. A bit better than that. Okay, so where am I going? Around there, around the back. Just take out some of that mask. So you can be as neat or as messy as you want for this. I'm going to try and be somewhat neat. Yep. You know, if you are using polygroups, which I do advise you to use, it's good just to take a bit of time just to make sure they're nice and cleanly set up first. Okay, so I've got that. That's my upper arm. So if I control and W, now my arms are a polygroup. So now what I can do is if I just want to work on my body, I can sculpty, sculpty, sculpt. If I just want to work on my arms, I can sculpty, sculpty, sculpt. All good. And then I can say, okay, what if I just want to work on my lower arm? There you go. So now I've got a new polygroup. What about my legs? So make sure I've got my whole leg in there. Boom. And then do the same thing. Maybe I just want my lower leg. Like that. And you can be as neat and as dirty as you want. That's just a really, really quick, quite nasty kind of setup there. If, however you want to draw that mask on, so if I lasso that, but I want my bums to be in there, then I'll change my lasso to be a mask pen. And then I just make sure I grab that section there. Make sure I've masked off everything. Get around that hip area there. Underneath there. And then when I mask that, I've got my bum in there as well. So masking, not masking, sorry, polygroups are really, really useful. So they don't have to be separate meshes. They can be on the same mesh, but you can obviously just say like, right, I just want to work on the torso for now. I just want to work on those upper arms. If you want to work on the upper arm and the lower arm at the same time, this is a little bit funky, but what you can do is, I want to use these two. I want to just work on these two sections. So what I'm actually going to do is, first of all, isolate my body, and then while holding Control and Shift again, just tap on the body again, and it's going to invert the selection. And then if I tap on another region that I don't want, I get rid of them. So then I've just got my arms. So I'll do that again just to clarify it. I just want to work on my arm section, but my arm section is broken up into two sections. So if I just tap this one, I've lost that one. But if I just tap this one, I've lost this one. So what I can do is invert everything and get rid of stuff I don't want. So I'm going to tap on my body first, like that. And then if I, while holding, this is all while holding Control and Shift. And then tap on my body again, it's going to invert the selection. So now it's inverted the isolation. And then I just Control Shift, tap on the legs, get rid of them. Now we're like this. So now we've got those two bits I can work on in isolation. And then tapping grey space just to bring everything back. Cool. So polygroups, very, very useful. We're going to be talking about these more and more as time goes on because they are very, very useful. And it does make your sculpting life easier. Because we're working on a full body now, it's much better that we do this. Because as we're sculpting, you know, if I'm trying to sculpt the palm of the hand, this body's getting in the way, innit? You know, if I'm trying to sculpt underneath the arm, there's a possibility that, you know, the body of the arm's going to get in the way. So, or if I'm trying to kind of do the underside of the groin here, you know, that's going to get in the way. And you can even make it asymmetrical. So if I just do this, I could grab just one leg. And just isolate that. So now I've got a different isolation for each leg. There you go. Okay, so let's make some hands. So like I said, I'm going to make my hands, my palm, straight from the body itself. I'm not going to make a separate shape. But if you want to make a separate shape, make a separate shape. Do whatever feels most comfortable to you and whatever feels most achievable to you. Okay. So there's a couple of shapes that I really want to make sure that I'm going to be achieving as I'm doing this. One thing, again, I want us to avoid is just having hands coming out of the palm like that, because it makes our hands really small and thin and kind of weird. You remember, we've got fat pads at the bottom, but also I want us to think about that transition from the wrist into the palm. It doesn't have to be a great, massive swoop, but I want us to have like a little bit of a dip as we come into the palm there, because you've got wrist muscles there, you've got wrist bones, you've got all this information that's on top and tendons and stuff. It does create a little bit of a lump, which reads as a little bit of a dip. And then underneath, you know, you've got that hand muscle, that thumb muscle right there. Thumb pad right there, which transitions into the arm like that. So, you know, remember these shapes. These are shapes I'm going to follow. Okay. Oops. Right then. So I'm going to carefully do this, and I'm going to make sure that I'm paying attention to my model. I don't want to make stuff too long or too short. And if I do need to, I'm not going to be afraid of just pushing and pulling stuff back. Okay. Right, okay, so let's... There we go. Oh, I've not got symmetry turned on. Make sure you got symmetry. If you're doing what I'm doing here, make sure you got symmetry turned on. There you go, symmetry. So yeah. And I'm remembering that these are a head long. Right. Get the ham in there, the palm. Like this. Step back a little bit. Does that palm look okay? So what I'm doing here is I'm thinking, okay, is that palm, the palm swoop's looking good. The sweep, the length of that, if I was to have a head in here as well, and then add that extra, like double that length for my fingers, and my hand's going to be too long. The heel looks okay. So I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm just going to pull down a little bit of information for my thumb. And then pull down a little bit for the back of the hand. Already it looks very handy, you know, because I've got those shapes in there. But my biggest one, my biggest bugbear with a lot of hand modelling is this little swoop at the top of the arm. Okay. Now that I've done that, it's time to get some of those shapes in there. Okay, so number one, that fat pad, or that angle change. So because the knuckles are here, the fat pad's here, because we want to get that longer at the back, shorter at the palm side thing. So we need to get that little angle in there, which I'm going to achieve by using, in this case, a trim dynamic. So boop, 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 boop. And when I should have said as well, when I was dragging out that stuff before, I was envisioning that width of my pointer finger to my ring finger being the width of my wrist, and then I've added a little bit for the little finger on the outside. I've not really pulled out much for the thumb just yet, because I'm just dealing with the fingers, obviously. Okay. Oh, I need to do that a bit more. So I look from below. Yeah, that's better. Let's do a Dynamesh. At this stage as well, because my hand is being made out of my body, I need to be careful of well, I need to make sure my Dynamesh is either at the same level of as everything else, or it's maybe one higher, or like a few higher than my original. Another thing I'm looking at here is my hand is slightly tilted. Here, I want to keep my hand nice and flat, so I'm just going to quickly lasso this, just soften out that, and then I'm going to rotate the hand so it's flat. Again, we want to have that palm facing outwards. That's looking okay. Yeah. Let's bring out a bit for the thumb, just a touch. There we go. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that you're putting these digits in the right position. The thumb is at the front of the body, obviously. I have in the past caught myself out by sculpting things backwards. Right, let's try and get that flat bit in again. There we go, that's better. That's better. And I'm just going to indicate the knuckles. So, knuckle 1, knuckle 2, knuckle 3, knuckle 4. Mega. Cool. Now I'm just going to just make a valley. We're talking about this in class as well. At the beginning, I'm going to make a valley in between each one of the knuckles to give myself a better indication about where the knuckles are at the beginning. Cool. Right. So now it's time to make the fingers. Now, in class I made them through... Oh, my thumb, sorry, before I move on to my thumb. Before I move on, I've got to do my thumb. Right, my thumb, like I said, I'm going to make as a snake hook tool, with the snake hook tool. So BSH for the snake hook. It will come up with this message saying, I prefer to be used in Sculptris Pro. I'm going to ignore that. That's fine if we're going to be using this to make big shapes. I'm be using it a lot. But because we're only going to use it once to make the thumb, I'm not going to use it. I'm not going to use Sculptris Pro. So all I need to do here is, you might take a couple of attempts to do this, is I'm just going to drag out a thumb. Oh, I pretty much nailed it first time. Yay. So it might take you a few attempts to do this. All you got to do is angle your camera in the right position. So if I'm looking at a hand, could I drag out a thumb and have it be facing forward like I've just done then? So I've angled my camera, if we're looking at the skull at the top, kind of 3/4 like there, and I found where the thumb's coming out from there. You can see the size of my brush just on the edge there. I'm just gonna just like that, and then from there it's just all about moving and stuff. So I'll re-dynamesh it to get a better shape in there. Has it been re-dynameshed? It has, because when it first came in then it looks like this, because the snake hook tool is a smear tool. If I do some snake hooking somewhere, this is what the snake hook does. It smears that mesh around, which is really good for doing some stuff, you know, creature horns and stuff, but it can be a bit dangerous. But you can see what it does to the geometry as well. It breaks it, it smears it. So I'm just going to re-dynamesh. And then with the normal move brush, I'm just going to start to sculpt in, or moving, not even sculpt, moving some of that information. So like I said before, it's really important that we don't just go sculpting really early on. We want to use our move brush and our smooth brush for 90% of the initial work. Because here, it'd be so tempting just to get the like dam standard or something, or the clay build up to make the mass, but I don't want to do that. Right, just isolate that. There we go. Make the part of the thumb. Make the thumb. Let's make sure I'm facing it forward. Make that a little bit thinner there. So I thin out around the second knuckle, and I make it a little bit like a bit of a spade for the tip of the thumb. It just gives a better first initial thumb shape. There you go. So I'm looking directly at it there, and that to me looks like it's facing forward. Oh, not quite. There you go. There you go. So that's my thumb for now. It's the first initial thumb. Obviously we're going to come back and rework stuff when other stuff has been done. So, dead easy that. If you want to make your thumb out of a separate shape, totally do it. If you want to try and use a snake hook to make your thumb, totally do it. It's completely up to you. Just as long as you remember that it faces a certain direction. Now, looking at this, I suspect that I will have to actually make this a little bit bigger. This looks a little bit small for now, but I'm going to leave it. Cool, so let's make my fingers. I'm going to make my fingers the same way that I made them in class by using the curve. But as per usual, you can make this out of a single cylinder, or you can make each knuckle region from a separate cylinder, so you have 3 cylinders per finger. But I'm only going to make one finger, and then I'm going to duplicate it and modify it for every other finger. So, what I'm going to use is something called a curve tool. So, B for brush, C for my curves. Now I can't finish off this because the curve that I want sits inside this menu of many 9s. So you can see there's so many 9s. And what I want to use is the curve tube, and that's just one of many 9s. Now you can make custom shortcuts for this kind of stuff if you really use it all the time, or you can put it on your, if you make a custom shelf or whatever. That's fine if you use it a lot, but if you don't use it a lot, don't bother doing that. Just be aware of where it is and what it is. I don't use it enough to really warrant it having any screen space. But it's BC, and it's right there. Curve tube. Now the way that this curve tube works is I just click on the surface. I'm on my body here. If I click on the surface, and if you've isolated, your full body will come back. You're basically drawing a curve against this original subtool. So you can see that I've got a piece of geometry, and you see I've got a curve in the middle that I can interact with and move around, which is quite cool. Now I'm going to do a whole video on a curve and how to use curves, because there is a menu for it and there are some cool functions, but I'm going to keep it simple for this. So I've made a curve there, but maybe my curve is too big. The curve is determined by the initial radius of your brush there. So now if I make this, while I don't hover over this. If I just in space makes it a bit smaller, and then tap on that curve again, it's going to change the radius, and it flattens it out for some reason. Is it something I'm doing that? Okay. I think because it's the Z intensity, does that flatten it out? Is that something? Oh my god, I've just discovered something. Never mind. I've literally just discovered something that I've never known before. So make sure my Z intensity is 100. So yeah, it changes the shape of the radius determined on your brush. So if I change this to really big and then tap on that, it's going to make it really big. But obviously, depending on the length of your curve, some might not be very good. Now if I hover over, you'll see that the brush turns blue. That means that I can change the size of the brush I'm going to interact with the curve. So if I'm hovering over here, and change the brush size, all I'm doing here is I'm changing the size of the manipulating brush. So if I make it very, very small, I'm only moving that one little zone, which means I can make it I can make it worm quite easily. But if I make it very big, then it's a big, softer kind of brush. It's working a much bigger area. And then if I... So you can see when I go from one to the other, it changes because one's interacting with the brush and interacting with the curve, and one isn't. Right, so... oh yeah, and if you want to basically make the curve turn into proper geometry, proper workable geometry, you just click on the mesh you made it from. There you go. So that curve has now disappeared, which makes this a actual piece of geometry, which is currently in this subtool. It makes it within the same subtool. So if you want to split it, if you want to get it off, you just have to go to split parts, and then that'll be its new subtool. Now this is obviously got symmetry turned on, so I've made two of them. So I'll get rid of that. Get rid of that. There you go. So let's make a finger. I think I'll do this asymmetrically at first. So I'm going to just determine the size of my finger. So I'm thinking maybe about that. And I'm just going to drag down. Like that. Now I'm going to go for my middle finger first, because that's the main finger. So I'll make my middle finger first. Make sure it's as straight as possible. There you go. Check the length a little bit, you know, just quick eyeball of the length. That looks okay to me. Yeah, it looks okay to me. Now the angle's a bit off, but that's fine. I can change that. Yeah, there we go. Right, so I'm now wanting to actually do some sculpting with this. So I'm going to tap on the body where it was made from, like that. So now it's actually been made. If you have a grey line that sometimes appears and sticks behind, it's just a graphical glitch inside ZBrush. It always happens. I've got some scenes where I've got lines everywhere that I just can't get rid of. So then I'm going to split these apart. I'm just going to work on this as a separate shape. Okay, so fingers. What I'm looking at here as a basic kind of thing is obviously we've got our knuckle here, and then we've got two knuckles going down the finger with the fingernail. There was an old artist years ago called George Bridgman who brought out a bunch of books, and in one of the books he talks about hands. This is a book all about hands, and one of the ways he breaks down the landmarks of the hand, of the finger, is thinking about it as, well, the finger bones, but I guess we don't really think about it too much. But from the knuckle, if I make that a bit bigger, that might be easier to see. From the knuckle, you go in, second knuckle, third knuckle, fingertip. So those are the regions I'm going to be thinking of. And at first my fingers are going to have a little bit of a sloop on the inside and a curve on the outside to kind of emphasize that shape. And then obviously I've got to make sure that I've got my tip of my finger looking okay. So tip of fingers are now either super round or super sharp. The tips of fingers are more like that kind of shape, like a very soft bullet head kind of thing. Look, pardon me, look at your own fingers, for example. I mean, we're doing hands, and we've all got the absolute perfect hand examples in front of us at all times. You know, it's right here. From the side as well, what I'm going to be doing is, yes, I'm going to be thinking about landmarks, but I'm also going to be thinking about the natural curve of the hand. So I'm starting off with a very straight shape here, but I'm going to turn it into something natural, and also the tip of the finger. So the tip of the finger again isn't just a round circle like that. It's a pad. You've almost got like a plane, and a plane on your finger. Cool. So let's actually do some stuff. So again, 90% move brush and smooth brush, 10% sculpting. Because this at the beginning, it's all just going to be move brush and smooth brush. So I get my move brush up, and I'm going to use my smooth brush quite a lot here. So I'm going to first use my smooth brush just to thin it out a little bit. Any length I lose, I'm going to pull it down a little bit more. So boom, like that. Like that. And one trick that I have to get the finger looking fingery at first is get an idea about where my knuckles are going to be. Like that. Oh, I should probably dynamesh this. Yeah, let's dynamesh this. Low resolution first. Don't go mad on the resolution. So where am I at? My resolution, let's go for, see what 64, no, not 32, that's going to be far too small. No, so because my initial mesh was small, I think I've got to go higher sooner. And that still needs to be higher, that. Let's go for 256. That's better. So you might not necessarily have the same numbers relate to the same density as your mesh, depending on how you've created the mesh, you know, how big and how small it is naturally in the scene. So you've got to be paying attention to the density. Now this density here is perfect for me, because what that allows me to do is using the smooth brush. Right there, I've made that little bit of a dip there. So first knuckle, second knuckle, third knuckle. So already I'm getting that finger shape in there. And like I said, this is all just down to move brush and smooth brush. Because I've got my knuckles. Like that. Just a little bit of movement around. Now what I'm going to do is add a little bit of bend to this as well. Just a little, not a super curvy bend, just a little bit. And I'm just going to use my lasso mask again. And I'm just going to... Actually, no, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to do that later on because we can have fun with polygroups for that. But right now, that's looking okay. Let's just solo myself off for a sec. Let's just get some landmarky stuff in there. Right, cool. Okay, so very, very quickly I've got my thumb in there. My finger. And as you can see, it's actually really easy. If you just think about a nice simple shape, nice low resolution, simple tools, all I've used there, at most I've used a dam standard just to slice in a bit of that crease behind the knuckle, but really all I've used is the smooth brush just to smooth down those knuckle forms we were talking about. So knuckle, 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 knuckle. So that's all I've done, is just smooth those back a little bit, not too much. I've just rounded off the front a little bit, again making that soft bullet shape. And then just thought about that plane of the finger. So I'm not just got a big old loop like that, I've got a bit of an upward tilt to my finger like this. That's all I've done. Boom. Good. Now it's time to make some fingers. Super, super quick and super, super easy, because I've got my finger right there. I'm just going to check quick that I've got that Nike swoop in my hand there. and I've got the swoop in my hand there. Actually, you know what? In my palm, it could be a bit better. This could be a little bit lower. That could be a little bit higher. That could be a little bit lower. That could be a bit higher. Okay, so just some adjustments there. So I'm going to take that. So I've got my thumb right, my finger right there, my middle finger. It's looking okay. The length is all good. The angle is looking good. Okay, yeah, now the angle's looking better. So there, I've got that angle a bit straighter. Rather than that, I've got it a little bit straighter, like that. So, oops, there you go. What I'm going to do is just do my quick duplicate thing. So remember, holding control and then dragging off one of the arrows will do a quick duplication. So hold control, drag off to make my pointer finger, and then I've just got to make sure it's in the right position. So bring it back and down a little bit, because remember we've got that Nike swoop. And look at your own hands, look at that pointer finger, and then, so I'll turn on my camera for a bit. There you go. So middle finger, there you go, middle finger, pointer finger. You know, can you find some kind of landmark on that? So my pointer finger, the tip of the nail, is pretty much at the bottom of the nail of the middle finger. My ring finger, the tip of my nail is pretty much going through the middle of my nail. So I can use those as like little personal landmarks, because my pointer finger is actually shorter than my ring finger. But some people it's opposite, some people they're flat. You know, so hands are different from person to person. So I'm going to use my hand and my measurements to get the right measurements on there. So I've not done any scaling just yet. But what we'll do is just slightly make it a bit shorter using the y-axis, like that, and maybe touch it with a little bit of the center. So I'm using all the axes here to scale it down a touch, because what that's going to do is make it ever so slightly thinner, but then also ever so slightly shorter at the same time. We don't want to make it too short or too thin or too fat and stuff. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to invert that selection, so I'm back to my middle finger. Move my pivot point back to, you know, a good position like that. Do the same thing, hold control, drag it off. Like that. Move it backwards. Scale it in a little bit to make it a little bit thinner overall, and then just make it a little bit shorter. Like that. That, and then just last one, little finger. I can shrink that down quite a lot. So my little finger, if I bring back the camera, there you go. My little finger, the tip of my little finger is pretty much on the knuckle of my ring finger. So again, another little measuring landmark for myself. And obviously the little finger is much thinner and smaller than the rest of them. There we go. Awesome. So we've got some curve to the hand. Oh, that's, you know what, that little finger there could probably come back a little bit. There you go. So we've got that Nike swoop to the hand. The fingers are in place. They all look pretty good, pretty decent. Nice and simple. I've only made one finger, and we're already good. Obviously, we've got to match up some of that information to the palm, so I can come in here and let's step back a little bit and see how that looks compared to everything else. Yeah, the hand actually looks the right size for the body. I'm happy with that. So I can just adjust some of the palm. So pull out some of this information here. Pull out a little bit of this information. So now it's just about using that move tool just to match up better some of this information. So move the knuckles into a better position. If I just do this, there we go. So like from the back, this is looking pretty good. So flatten these off a little bit. I don't have too much of a curved angle on the outside here and here. I don't want, because again, if you look at the creases, I'm coming back on camera. I love being on camera today. Oh, I've got that. Still got my pen working there. There we go. Because if you look at the creases on the hand, I don't know how well you can see that there. There you go. On the outside, little finger and the pointer finger, they're not super like curved in a diagonal. They're a little bit curved because obviously we have got the curve there from the swoop, but they're not like maniacally like super angled like that. So on this, I just want to make sure that I'm not having like an angle like that, for instance, because that might have happened just through natural, sculpting of the hand. So I'll flatten this off a touch on both sides. Same for the front as well. So just bring that up a little bit. There's my main knuckle. Bring my main knuckle up a little bit. Again, we want that Nike swoop. That's looking good. So now I can look at my thumb and think, right, how are my thumbs looking? How is that looking? What's going on? I think it does need to be a bit longer and a bit fatter. So what I'm going to do is just pull that forward a little bit, and then just start to pull out some of that mass. And I'm moving around a lot when I'm doing this as well, because just like with the arms and legs, it might look good from one angle, but as you move around, another angle is going to appear. It's like, oh god, that's horrible. So everything's looking okay here. I mean, my thumb still looks a little bit thin, but everything looks okay, except when I get here, it looks very thin. So what I can do is hit this with a little bit of that inflate, just like we did with the arms and stuff. Nice low intensity. Just slightly. I just want to touch it a little bit. I want to get away from noodle fingers as well. I don't want smooth fingers. I want to have those bony landmarks. Because if I draw over the knuckle, the first knuckle for the thumb is here. Second knuckle for the thumb is here. Third knuckle's here. So I want to get those, those points in the mesh. Because obviously we've got 1, 2, 3 knuckles for the hand, so the thumb's going to have the same stuff. So I'm just going to make sure that I've... Now we're getting to the point where I could think about using some sculpting tools, at least on the palm of the hand. Let's make sure my thumb isn't too fat. That's looking better. Okay, so yeah, I think I'll come in here with a little bit of the sculpting tool stuff. So again, clay build up, focal shift set to 0. I'm just going to build up a little bit of information on the palm of the hand for that pad. Let's get some dam standard just to break up the palm. So I've got that palm, I got that palm across there. That's that. I have the tendons coming across there. So again, just like with the head, body, whatever, I'm sketching in that information. Okay. Yes, I'm just carefully adding this stuff in. So this is the first time I'm actually doing some proper sculpting on the hand, and it's only just to add stuff onto the fat bits. I'm not even touched the fingers or the thumb with any of this sculpting brush. It's just the fat parts of the hand. That's looking good. Yeah, it's actually looking really good. And then I'm just going to push in some of that tendon information there. Okay. Okay, so we're getting close to actually getting these things Dynamesh together and stuff. Let's do another quick Dynamesh just to make sure everything's looking good. Let's knock up that resolution to 280. Let's go for 280. There you go. There we go. So I've just knocked up the resolution of the whole body up by a touch. Right, okay. So now the fingers, I'm going to just refine the fingers a touch. So obviously we're very straight fingers, but we don't always want straight fingers. We want more curved fingers. And here is where we can revisit the polygroup stuff. Because I've made all my fingers there, let's make them all 280 so they're all in the same resolution as the body. There you go. Oh, okay. That's shouldn't happen at this resolution. Let's knock that up a little bit further. So we had a little bit of webbing in between there. No. There you go. So you can see there, in between the fingers, you have a little bit of webbing. And this is one of the reasons why you want to make things different polygroups. So the hands, like the rest of the body is at 280, which is cool. But maybe when we actually merge all these things together at the end, we'll have to knock it up even further. Maybe, at least on mine anyway, maybe about 360. Because remember at the beginning, my body was probably smaller than I usually make them for some reason. Okay. But what I'm going to do is make all these separate polygroups, because again, these are all separate shapes. But because I did that quick duplication from the first shape, they're all in the same polygroup. So I'm going to come to polygroups, auto group, cool. And then when I Dynamesh, what I can do is turn on groups. So in Dynamesh menu here, I can turn group on there. So then these shouldn't Dynamesh together when I re-Dynamesh them. So to do that, and it always does that. Is it because I'm using a lasso or something? There are some fun things that ZBrush can throw at you, and this happened in class. I think it was the second class this happened in. This little annoying little bug that happens every now and then. It's fine. I'll continue as I am. So, one reason why using all these different polygroups is useful is because if I go to either move, scale, or rotate, just hold Control and then tap on one, it'll isolate everything but that one finger, which is mega. Because what I want to do now is angle my fingers to give them a natural position. Because again, we're tensing our fingers and making them straight at the minute, but then I want to add that relaxation. So yeah, they all have to be in different auto groups to do polygroups to do this. So when I either move, scale, or rotate at the top, just hold Control and I can tap on one of them to mask off everything but that. So here, move a pivot point just to the top of the knuckle, and then I'll do a slight rotation, and then I'm going to use the lasso mask to mask off the first knuckle. Move this to the knuckle position, slight bend, and then second knuckle. There you go. So get some nice little curvature there. And actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to give my finger a slight rotation inwards. Ever so slightly rotated inwards. And outwards while we're here as well. Because I've got all my fingers being straight as well. And if I relax my hand, my fingers are a little bit splayed. So I turn it inwards from below slightly. And then from the top I'll just splay it out a little bit. Okay, move my second finger, my middle finger. Nope, pivot point at the top where the knuckle is. First knuckle mask. Rotate that. Second knuckle mask. Like that. Second knuckle mask. And then do the same thing basically. Go through and get a nice rotation. Now I might want to come in here later on and adjust some of these, because maybe with the rotations I actually end up smoothing off some of the knuckle shapes, so I can come back in here and strengthen those knuckle shapes again. Maybe. So you can see there I've got a very natural look to the fingers there. But I will go back, and just as I did with that first pointer finger, I'm going to grab this one, Put this up into the knuckle and slightly rotate it inwards. And then same for this one, put this up into the knuckle position. And then slightly rotate this in. There you go, so that's much more natural. Yeah, look at that. There you go. So I think the fingers were just so close to each other that they were merging, but now that I've done some movement, they're actually just separated enough. Now we go back to the hand and we jump onto our last bit of sculpting. What I'm going to do is just start to make more of a divot, and I'm making more of a divot behind the fingers in the web at first, and pull some of that web back. Actually, now that I've moved this finger back, I need to pull some of that webbing back. Push that back a little bit. Push that back a little bit, because again, I got that Nike swoop. That's better. Yeah. So I want to make those indentations between the fingers a bit. So you can see the difference from where we started off with that hand on the left there to where we are now. Massive, massive difference. So what I'm going to do is, with my main body, I'm going to do a mirror and weld, because obviously I've worked on this left hand side a lot, so I need to get the same information on the other side. That's looking good. And then I'll mirror and weld the fingers. Beautiful. And now I'm going to start working symmetrically now. Cool. So now it's time to bring these two things together. So let's merge my body back down onto my hand. I'm going to do a quick save on this. Alright. Now I'm going to move, make sure I've not got geometry Dynamesh. Yeah, so my groups is turned off now. And I'm going to move my Dynamesh up to about, for me, 350. Maybe a bit higher than that. 350 doesn't seem to feel enough. That's better. So I've moved up my resolution, so I've not gone, again, I've not gone crazy with the density, but I've just upped the density a little bit, because at this stage, now I'm up to my last 10% of sculpting. I'm up to getting that information that I would want to get in there. So, turn that off. And number one, what it's going to be is just getting rid of some of that joining information. But I will step back and look at it and go, okay, what information does work? Is there any information from where we Dynameshed in we can actually leave behind? Because maybe it helps us give an impression of some wrinkles and stuff. And is there any information in there which gives us more of like a doll, like for instance where you have the fingers entering the hand, it looks a little bit doll-like. So sculpt some of that in, or out, should I say? Carefully. That's looking okay at the back. That's looking fine. So now I'm going to add some knuckle information just to like finish off the hand for now. And what I'm going to do is, instead of adding a mound for the knuckle like that, I'm going to add two small little lumps either side of the knuckle. Because as I was saying in the beginning, your knuckles are like little chicken bones and the tendons run through this little dip in the middle. And then get that dip back in there. Just get some of those tendony informations in there for the fingers. Again, we're adding, we're smoothing back. We're adding, we're smoothing back. Notice as well, I've not built up any major mass by using the sculpting brushes. The sculpting brushes have only really been to add a bit of information. I'm doing as much control as I can with the actual just move brush itself. So I'm seeing there the back of the hand looked a little bit bulbous, so I'm just pushing it back a tad. Now one last thing I like to do is, and this goes back to that George Bridgman thing again, and it only really works on male hands, so female hands or more softer hands might not look good with this, is I like to give a little bit of a band around each one of the bottoms of the thumbs, of the fingers, like that, and I put one down here as well for the thumb. It just adds like a little bit of muscle definition in there, which is just quite pleasing to look at. So again, with the clay build up, I just like there, for instance, just helps build up some of the mass. Oh. Helps build up some of the mass, but that helps. Just like that. So you can see you've got that kind of U shape at the bottom of each one of the hands. Now there are things that I would obviously work on with this a bit more. The webbing of the finger seems a little bit too long, so I could use a move brush to, pull that back off. It's a lower res, so we're not going to get as much information. I've not got any of this arm ulnar information yet, so the ulnar, get that in there. Oof, that's nice. Make sure I've turned the symmetry again, so make sure there we go. Some of the more tendinous information. It's only very subtle, but the tendons in the thumb there, the little divot. That lovely little triangle shape, which is just missing just outside the hand there. Let's add a bit more shape to the hand. So now I'm in sculpting. I'm back. I'm in sculpting mode. I'm adding that fat deposit, the flesh build up, tendons, wrinkles, creases. And one last thing I like doing on bigger hands. That seems a little bit too long for a start. Hang on a minute. There we go. Push that down a little bit. On the pad of the hand near the fingers, it's like adding a little bit of a break in between each one of the fingers, a subtle one in between each one of the fingers. And again, you take your time with your hands. There's a lot of information within the hands that you just need to be constantly moving around and checking, and use yourself. Again, you are your best reference. And at the higher resolutions, you're able to strengthen those shapes a lot more, bring in a lot more of that information. But that is where I'm going to leave it for that. So the hands. Hands actually on the body. Hands actually on the body. And at that point as well, we're pushing the resolution up. So we're up. The body's getting to a point where it's still low res. You still really can't get any proper information in there. But we're getting to a point now. We're getting close to that point of being able to really sculpt in some really precise detail. So far, so good. Cool.